driving, spinning, fading, hitting! 1.1 to go! Oh my goodness, Tyrese Maxey!
Daniel House fills the lane and fills it up.
What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Pick Swap Podcast. Has been a little bit for us here, but the Sixers world feels like it's starting to pick up again and hit its full swing. So I'm excited to be breaking things down. With me today, I have my usual co-host, James Birrane. James, how we doing today?
Doing well, man. Excited.
There we go. And we have a very special guest. We have Josh Reynolds. You know him from the You Know Ball podcast presented by SB Nation and Liberty Ballers. So, Josh, I appreciate you for coming on today. How we doing, and what's your overall outlook for the Sixers right off the bat here?
Doing well. Also, just one little correction. You Know Ball is my guy, Troll.
Oh my gosh.
That's Ball, folks. You're good. You're good. It's a good plug. I love my guy over there. Great podcast. Fall if you're not listening. But I'm doing great, man. Sean, James, it's an honor for you guys to ask me to hop back on here.
I can't believe I did that. Fans of both podcasts for the record here, but yeah, that's Ball, folks, for Josh Reynolds there. So completely my fault on that one.
You're good, brother. You're good. You're good.
All right, but Josh, I wanted to have you on today to start with a little bit of positivity with the Sixers world. It feels like it has been an all-time negative summer. You are very much a beam of positivity when it comes to the social media world, which I'm very appreciative of. So what's your just kind of overall level of how you're feeling about the team throughout this offseason and as we're starting to approach training camp?
Thank you for the compliment, by the way. I try to be a little positivity beam of light, but in the in Philly sports world, sometimes it's really hard to be. Yeah. So I would say the exact same thing about you guys. It's nice to have some uplifting vibes around. And how about that? And weirdly enough, who would have thought Kelly Oubre Jr. signing would all of a sudden spark this little fire? Because I feel the same way. I haven't talked about the Sixers in depth on my podcast or really on Twitter or anything like that for a while. And then I don't know why, but signing Kelly Oubre Jr. all of a sudden kind of made me like, okay, let's take a step back. Let's look at the roster as constructed. And weirdly, I feel more positive than I have all offseason, which is honestly, it's great because I am sick of being bummed out.
Yeah, absolutely. And James, what about you? Is that Sixers edge starting to come back a little bit? Are you finally mentally prepared? Is that how you're feeling?
Yeah, I think if you guys know me at all, I don't know if it really ever left. So I can't help it. But, with this, I was saying to some coworkers today, they got a quirky, weird looking rotation here. They're looking a lot different than they have in years past. And, for better or for worse, they're going to be a much different squad this upcoming year, regarding whatever happens either before or during this season. But either way, this roster is looking interesting from top to bottom. So I'm excited to get into it because, one way or another, they're going to look different. And to me, that's a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. And for me, I'm finally hitting that point that it took way longer this offseason than it usually does of me being itching to watch the Sixers play basketball again and for the full swing to happen. But I do think the Kelly Oubre signing was something that helped trigger it, that just a little bit something different. This is a type of player that we have not seen on a Sixers roster really throughout the past decade when it comes to the most traditional wing, you could really argue, probably the best scoring impact off the bench that they've had since Lou Williams. So a lot to like there. So let's talk about Kelly a little specifically. Josh, I'll start with you. What's kind of your feel for the signing as a whole and your kind of expectations for Kelly this season?
So his name had kind of been linked to us. I didn't know how seriously it actually was linked kind of all off season. And then the reports started coming out that he's waiting on Miami and the whole Dame situation. And in my mind, I'm like, that's the perfect fit. He seems like a Miami guy. He seems like a dude who's going to go play with Jimmy and Dame, and it's going to work out, and it's going to bug me so bad. So I kind of just gave up, honestly. In my mind, all right, ship sailed, Kelly's out. And that, was it Shams or Woj who tweeted it first? I don't remember.
I saw the Woj one, but I was a little late to the punch on this one.
And I was shocked. It caught me way off guard. And again, like we talked about, James, you nailed it. Look, I like that we're going to be different because that's what's needed, right? I think the Nick Nurse thing, that was the domino effect. I think that was the first chip to fall, and this whole roster, again, for better or for worse, it just looks entirely different. So to get a guy like Kelly Oubre Jr., look, the negative guys, all the negativity surrounding him, if he's a chucker, He is. But
Yeah.
to your point, Sean, we've never had that since a guy like Lou Williams. And
Right.
we need that. We need bench production. So to get a dude like that, again, coming out of Charlotte, you tweeted this the other day, Sean, actually, and I loved it. Are they empty stats that it came from, right? Like you guys even talked about on your last episode. He played for Charlotte, a bad team, a banged up team. Yes, he had career high, but I don't care. We know what he's capable of. And if he can accept that role coming off the bench, be a chucker. I don't care one bit. We need those bench points. We need that productivity. I'm thrilled, man. I'm sipping the Kool-Aid. I'm all in on this.
I love it.
Yeah.
James, what about you?
I would say I agree too. I think when you're looking at this team and you're thinking about the losses of like a guy like Shake Milton and his production fluctuated, roller coaster ride with him. But what did he bring? He was a lengthy 2-guard, could handle a bit, maybe not the same necessarily type of player as Kelly Oubre, but Oubre is a wing. He's big. He can jump. He can hang defensively. Maybe not to the highest degree. He'll get some steals, and he's going to shoot a lot. And it's like he can fit in a starting lineup. He can fit off the bench. He can cover some spaces that are going to be necessary for this upcoming year, especially with so many question marks surrounding the rest of the roster and how the lineups will shake up. But I think we talked about this a while ago, Sean, and I think most of us were kind of on the out on Kelly Oubre, and we can kind of go back and review the film. But I think we were kind of on the outside of him, unfortunately. But I think at this point, when you're looking at the rest of the roster and where the gaps were, and we've been talking about just no wings. We haven't had wings in years. And he's not necessarily a top tier guy, but to get him on a 1-year, less than $3 million deal, sign me up all day. If he doesn't work out, no harm, no foul, really. So
Exactly.
With that, I think his production will definitely outweigh the contract, and I think he's going to be a good piece for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, that's the biggest point is this is a guy that was a 20-point per game scorer last year that was just gotten on a minimum deal. That is absurd value when it comes to the NBA. And I get it. Like, it is Charlotte. You do have to view it through a little bit of a microscope that it was a losing team. And that kind of has been the brand for Kelly Oubre, as the teams that he is stuck on have been losing teams. But I think what appeals to me the most about this is he's the kind of guy that you can slide up or down the rotation and it doesn't fully matter. Like, say there is the James Harden holdout situation. He doesn't need to play and they need to find a way to replace that production. Kelly's a guy you can give these extra shots to where he can get slid up in the rotation, play alongside these starters for burst, get his buckets, get his shots. Or if it's not working and he is a bad shot chucker, he's making bad decisions on the court, he's not defending, you just don't play him. Like, it's that simple. And to me, like, it is that low risk, high reward. And as far as like, I get it. He's not a perfect player. He has his flaws for sure. But I try and look at this as kind of comparing him to like a Matisse Thybulle or a Jalen McDaniels. And frankly, it's not even close as far as who's a better basketball player. The answer is Kelly Oubre. That this style of wing, we haven't had somebody with this complete of a basketball skill set. I really can't remember the last one that, like, I don't want to throw an Iguodala comparison, but like that type of wing just has not existed on this roster. And Oubre is like a fresh breath of that. So I am excited to see it. And the value to me is insane. So Josh, for the next thing for you, or go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to say, especially this late into the offseason, like that was the shocking part. I'm like, hey, how is this dude still available? Again, I thought it was just he's waiting on the whole Dame situation, but I completely agree with everything you said there. Like, he is the guy, and to get him this late and this close to the like camp actually starting in a couple weeks, like that's crazy.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess he probably got sick of the Miami stuff of waiting to see what happens, as I think all of us have at this point, of all the constant rumors there. I am interested, and there's two different questions I have phrased for off this. Number one is there were a number of reports throughout the offseason linking Kelly Oubre to Miami if the Dame trade happens. I kind of view that as like they're going to empty the tank, getting in all these pieces in a trade, and he'll kind of replace that, step into that role. But there does seem to be some reports dating back to Dame specifically wanting to play with Kelly Oubre and some connections to that. Do you think there's anything to that, and Dame potentially opens up his list of candidates because of the Miami thing? Is Kelly Oubre the bridge to Dame Lillard? I'll throw it to Josh first.
That is amazing phrasing. If he is, that's wild. I didn't know that there were rumors that they kind of linked them together. I still will be shocked if that affects anything.
Yeah.
Look, you nailed it. We're all sick of this Dame thing. And honestly, it sucks. Dame went from this like lovable underdog dude to now it's like, just stop. Like, And that's the sad part too. It's like he hasn't come out with anything himself. It's just like rumors from his camp and all these different tweets.
Right.
It's like, just give it a rest. And then the report that just came out, yesterday, that's like, hey, if this mystery team actually does slide in, guess what? He's still going to do a trade to Miami. I'm like, this is for the guy, again, taking it for what it's worth, for the guy who has built his entire persona on not running from the grind to all of a sudden being like, get me to where I want to go or I'm not going to do anything. It's pretty disheartening and it sucks.
Sure.
But to answer your question, I'm hearing that for the first time. So if Kelly Oubre is the bridge, man, that's really wild. They must be good buddies.
Yeah, and it's also crazy to me. It's like Kelly Oubre is such like a gettable player. Like if Dame Lillard wants him, like the Trailblazers, how could you have not pulled the trigger on that by now? But James, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can't imagine that being the final piece to Dame's puzzle of like, hey, if you can bring me Kelly Oubre, I'm there. So that would just be a whirlwind of emotion for everyone. And I don't, Sean and I spent a lot of time saying like everything's going to fall into place once Dame gets traded. Is he going to get traded? Going to happen, or is he just going to sit out like for the first portion of this year? Miami's not upping their offer. The offer that's on the table is changing. So
and
what is going to
Miami
happen?
has really done nothing outside of that. Like their eggs are in this basket of making sure that this happens, and there just has been no
because they've lost pieces too.
Right, they lost Caleb Martin, they lost Gabe Vincent, or not Caleb Martin. I'm sorry,
Big
Gabe
pieces.
Vincent and Max Strus, both their starting guards, big pieces for them. So they're really invested in this, and I feel like it just feels like destined to happen, and it has been for months now. But it is very frustrating that essentially the entire NBA is just kind of waiting in the chokehold that the Dame Lillard has kind of brought us in. And I think like once that happens, we're going to see more movement across the board. Do you agree with that, Josh?
Yeah, I do. I completely do. Again, it just this entire waiting game. And then there was like a report that came out today that was like, hey, Portland's actually trying to get this thing done before camp starts. And look, if you're looking at this from the Portland perspective, of course, you're not just going to dump him off for nothing because he requested a trade. Nobody is dumb. Like they're not going to do that. But then looking at it from the Miami side, it's like, why on earth would we offer anything for a guy who's demanding and will probably sit out? So it is this weird stalemate where it's like, I don't know what's going to happen. To your point, James, like he easily could sit, and I wouldn't blame Portland one bit for not moving on him just to move on him. But yeah, I'm sick of it, man. I've never been more ready for basketball to get back here and for the offseason to end in my entire life than this offseason.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And especially the Trailblazers specifically, I'm like excited about that team beyond Dame too. I love Scoot Henderson. Anthony Simons is fun. Shaedon Sharp's intriguing. I want them to get their kind of momentum going with that squad too. So I'm looking forward to this being finalized for sure. But the last point that I want to bring up on Kelly Oubre specifically, I know that I'm kind of digging through the archives and the pop culture here, but it is the offseason, is there is some ties between Kelly Oubre and our guy James Harden there. So the story goes, and I will lay it out completely, that a couple of years ago, back when James Harden was in Houston, still playing with the Rockets, and Kelly Oubre, by the way, grew up in the Houston area, so I would assume is probably a fan of James Harden from that time. But James Harden threw a party. Kelly Oubre left with James Harden's girl. James Harden got so upset that he threatened to shut down the party. And by the way, Kelly Oubre is now married and has 2 children with the same girl. So do you think there is any issues between James? That was a strong reaction there. So I'll toss this one to you first on the question here. Do you think this impacts James Harden's outlook at all?
It makes me laugh because it's probably like Morey definitely knows that. So it's not a secret to anybody within the organization. I'll actually tell you, I heard a rumor of something. I don't know how. I have never really heard the full extent of this story until literally right now. But one of my coworkers who has been with the organization, with the Flyers and Sixers, he works at the Wells Fargo Center for a long time. He actually mentioned something to me. It was like, Oubre and Harden are not cool. That's all he said to me. And I was like, oh, I wonder how he knows that. Like, he must have some connections, And I was like, oh, all right. Didn't think much of it. I was like, that's a cool wrinkle to get involved there, but I did not realize it was that bad. And what a Kelly Oubre story. So on brand for him.
For sure. Josh,
I kind of like it.
I'm the same way, man. I didn't know that I heard the rumor that there was something there, but I didn't know that Kelly ended up marrying her and they have kids together. That's a whole other. I don't know. Like, you've got to think, to your point, James, right? Daryl for sure knows the history there. So, and Kelly Oubre obviously knows the history there. So it's got to be one of those things where it's like, okay, is Kelly's just willingly to like accepting to step into this really uncomfortable situation? I don't know. I love hearing it's a sad story, but I love hearing stories like this just because it kind of humanizes all these athletes a little bit.
Yeah.
That's wild though. And again, for an for a camp that's potentially going to get really uncomfortable here real soon with the Harden stuff, it's just another story added on top of it.
Yeah, for sure. It's like, why not at this point? And I mean, I don't think Morey probably specifically did this to make James Harden mad, but what I do know is they are definitely past the point of Morey giving Harden a phone call just for, hey, do you want a heads up on this? Whatever. That ship has sailed. So it was the right basketball decision. We've kind of gone over why already as far as what he brings to this team and why it's a good move. So I think Morey purely viewed it from that lens, but it is a little funny wrinkle that there is in there. So let's shift gears and talk a little about James Harden specifically. My fault. Did I cut you off, Josh?
No, you're good. Just one last thing of Kelly. Sorry, I've done this like 3 times that I wanted to say. He's a smart dude. Like you said, he's never played for a team that is a winning team. Like this will be the you could maybe a couple teams he was on, but this one like far and away is different. He's smart too, right? Like signing a 1-year deal, he could potentially set himself up for a nice like contract. Like this is a good contract here. So I liked what we were talking about earlier, where you can shift him up and down that entire rotation and he's going to produce or he won't. But either way, this could set him up for a team like the Sixers who are going to have a lot of money to spend and a lot of money off the books next year. Or he goes elsewhere. I like the fit. And again, from his perspective, it's like a 1-year deal on a winning team. Why would I not go do that?
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, the last comment on this, I think Kelly Oubre is objectively better looking than James Harden. So shout out that girl for choosing Kelly Oubre there.
Big W.
Yeah, he's a handsome cat.
For sure. Now, as far as the Sixers as a whole and the James Harden situation specifically, so we kind of touched on the Dame Lillard situation. The Sixers are in a similarly uncomfortable situation, I think, with less clarity for what the ending is. It feels like with the Dame stuff, they're at least like in some back of their mind, it feels like he's going to make his way to Miami. I'm not as confident that James Harden ends up with the Clippers. So, Josh, I'll throw this to you first. What's your kind of outlook for James Harden specifically as we enter training camp and your expectation for basically how this goes?
Man, I wish I knew. I wish I had a crystal ball where I could just look into it and be like, hey, let's just see like a month in the future and see how this ends, how the saga is over. It's been a wild roller coaster. And again, it just dominoed on top of all of us as Sixers fans for an already terrible offseason. Like you couldn't have left a worst possible taste in our mouths with how we went out. And then just to have this whole drama and roller coaster, it's the worst. So I will say, I have no idea. I don't know how this is going to end. Kind of stepping into it now, it's like, okay, just like the Dame situation, it's a perfect standstill because you look at this from Harden's perspective, and if he does feel like he got wrong, then great, you can blame him. You look at it from the Sixers perspective, and it's like, yeah, we're not going to trade you for a team that isn't even interested in offering Terrence Mann. Like, right? It's this weird standstill. So I don't know, man. I have no idea what's going to happen. I could see him playing. I could see him sitting. I honestly think I would be surprised either way at this point.
Yeah, it's tough. And it feels weird that it's like finally here, that there's going to have to be somebody calling somebody's bluff as far as how they're handling this. James, what's your ultimate read on how you think goes as training camp approaches?
Yeah, I think the weird part about it is the Sixers have the leverage in this situation, but it almost feels like that makes it worse because their hands not being forced to do something about it. So with the fact that they have the leverage, the uncomfortable situation entails, and they don't have to make a change right now. Like Morey knows that better than anyone else, that the ball is in his court and he's not ready to pass it. And until he gets something back in return, which is the right call. We've discussed this, a gross amount of times. It's the right call to wait, on, him to be able to get the return that he wants, the right price. But the problem with it is I could see him, Sean and I discussed this right before we got on here is, the hamstring gets tight first day of training camp and we don't see him again until he gets traded. And, the trade value is already at an all-time low. Can't imagine it gets that much lower, but if he doesn't even play due to a phantom hamstring injury or whatever might happen, I don't know what will happen, but it just seems like all the outcomes are bad. And the only one that's good seems very, very unrealistic. So I get worried, but I'm also ready to face the music at this point. Like it's time. we're there. Like the long off season has passed. James Harden got to say his piece. We all heard it. So now it's time for him.
So did those 14-year-olds.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe it's time for him to have to face the consequences. He said it himself. It's time to get uncomfortable. So hopefully we're getting to that point where first comes the uncomfortability and next comes a solution of some sort.
Yeah, and the phantom hamstring injury or just any real injury is by far my biggest fear, and I think it's very much on the table. Like, I could absolutely see this happening. That, to me, is probably the worst case scenario for the Sixers as far as how they manage this, because what can you really do in that situation? We've pretty much been through this with Ben Simmons. I'll say Ben Simmons handled things there's a blueprint for what not to do written from the Ben Simmons point of view, and the way that he kind of messed things up in the stuff just by kind of changing the story, having different reasoning like that. If James Harden lays out a plan, comes concrete, says day one, my hamstring hurts, and sticks with that, there's kind of nothing the organization can do. So that's probably my biggest fear. As far as a whole, there's a part of me that really believes like James Harden has to have had a wake-up call this summer. Like, it can't be more clear that there's no longer a blank check attached to your name as a basketball player. There's no longer an unlimited realm of team that wants your talents. That, yes, he's absolutely still a high-quality basketball player, far better than a lot of the guys that are being refused to be traded for him at this point. But because he plays such a niche style of basketball, and because so much of this off-court stuff comes attached to him, that there kind of comes a point where the talents and the baggage that comes with it doesn't already outweigh this. And if you pin me down and ask me what I honestly expect right now, it's probably we deal with the uncomfortable situation. I think James Harden probably doesn't suit up, that there's some sort of injury like that, and he's eventually traded to the Clippers for pennies on the dollar. And then James Harden sits in front of the LA media and says, this is where I wanted to go since I first forced myself out of Houston. This is my new home. I can't wait to sign a long-term deal. And then he will. He'll sign a 4-year long-term deal, and that's where he will play out his career. That's probably how I see the James Harden story going. But how does that help the Sixers is the ultimate thing. This kind of deal with the Clippers, and this kind of shifts toward like this plan as far as saving cap space. It's very clear that Daryl Morey, a lot of these 1-year deals are designed to get them off the books next year. And when we talk about the Patrick Beverleys, the Mo Bambas, the Kelly Oubre, that these deals, yes, they're players that can help this season, but it's intentional that they're not being around long term. So, Josh, I'll throw this to you as far as like the cap space plan as a whole. What's your feeling on that? And do you think that like is the route from here, or something that you think is kind of just making the best of a bad situation?
Man, that's a great question. I'm sure you guys saw the not reports, kind of talks, right? Of like, okay, it's no secret that the Sixers are going to have a ton of money off the books next year. There were like the Paul George and Kawhi's, right? Where they're like, yeah, they're probably not going to sign an extension. It's like, okay, do you really make a play at that? Because you nailed it, right? All these 1-year deals, that's exactly what this is for. I personally think just make the best out of this situation. I think that front office knows Joel Embiid's window, right? Some people could even argue, hey, that window's on its way closing. He's a big guy who's been injured, serious injuries in his career. He has relatively stayed healthy for the last couple seasons compared to what we've seen.
For sure.
And I hate to say it, and it's uncomfortable, but it's like, how much longer can we expect that? Then you have Nurse coming out, who I love Nick Nurse, and I'm pumped on the hire, but he's coming out and being like, hey, like our plan is totally different than what you guys are expecting. We're expecting him to play more. So it's like, okay, we know if he plays more, what that means, right? We know that those probabilities go up. So that's what scares me. If, okay, we are just playing this game. We're trying to get to next year until we can move some things around and get really aggressive in free agency. It's, okay, well, the key piece in the first stone is Joel Embiid, obviously. If something happens, that throws everything out the window.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's for debate, but I personally think it's, hey, we're making the most out of the situation we're in right now. Truth be told, I love the guys that we brought in these tiny deals. Would I love Patrick Beverley like 4 years ago? Of course I would have. But he's still Patrick Beverley, and I think that Philly is going to embrace him. They're like certain players who are made to play in certain cities, and Pat Bev is like Philly, written all over him. He's the underdog guy, even at this point in his career. However, me personally, I just think it's, hey, let's be as competitive as possible, given our situation now. Who knows? And who knows even what the deadline is like. There, even with this whole Buddy Hield thing that's come out today, there are reports that the Sixers have looked at him. I mean, we've looked at him for the last years.
Yeah.
He's the greatest almost Sixer of all time. But yeah, who knows? Like, who knows what this line looks like? I personally, again, it's funny that the Oubre signing pushed me to this point, but I like the moves that we've made in the short term to make us as aggressive and competitive as possible for this season.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you touched on a lot of good points there, and I do want to circle back to Buddy Hield specifically as well. James, I'll throw this to you as far as the cap space plan. I know we've kind of touched on it a decent bit, but now that it's kind of fully concrete in front of us, that we kind of see what the roster looks like and what the expectations are for this year and beyond, what's your real feel for the cap space plan?
I mean, I think it's the best case scenario at this point, right? Like, I think there's an ideology with the Sixers right now that was they made a sprint to a championship with the move to get Harden. Like, the timeline changed significantly in those 2-3 years. Moving on from Simmons, who's 24, 25, 26 at the time, to Harden, who's at the tail end of his prime, closer to the tail end of his career. This is kind of flipping that window, I think, the opposite way, where it's hopefully giving some light towards the beyond Joel Embiid years, as well as maximizing the last couple years of Joel Embiid's prime. And Daryl Morey, again, very intelligent guy. He knows what he's doing. All of these moves are intentional. Nothing that's happened this offseason is off a whim. It's definitely something that he's been planning out. And, the opening of cap space, he's dealt with a lot of things. He's dealt with the consequences of someone else's actions essentially the entire time he's been in the front office. So, whether it's for better or for worse, he's had to do that. And he's had to untie a lot of knots. So I think at this point, this would give him a chance to have a core of Embiid and Maxey and, whomever else, Paul Reed, and then go from there and decide, how can I optimize this roster around, these two pillars, plus some athletic wings, plus Paul Reed and whoever else is in that mix, Jaden Springer. I'm throwing these guys out there, but I am excited for those guys. I think their roles grow a lot in this upcoming year. I think that this might be a growing pain year for, a guy like Paul, who's going to get a lot of extra minutes, like Jaden Springer, who's going to get a lot of extra minutes. But you got a lot of good veterans in that building. You got a lot of guys that are going to push them. And I think regardless of the James Harden situation, I think if he's not there, I think they're still really competitive. Yeah. And they've kind of molded themselves into a situation where, Joel can kind of even out his stat line, right? Be a little bit more of a willing passer, attack in different ways. And then also, give Maxey more of the keys and let everyone else get involved. And I think Nick Nurse's offense and his system is going to really change the way we look at the way this team plays basketball. So I'm excited. And I think that, rebuilding and starting over with Nick Nurse is the best possible thing that they could do, given his vision.
Yeah, and I guess I would categorize this whole plan as like making the best of a bad situation, because this obviously isn't ideal, all the extra stuff when it comes to Harden and all the other circumstances. I do understand the logic. I get what they're going for as far as making sure that like you're basically giving yourself the ultimate flexibility. The part that I buy into the most is mainly seeing what exactly Tyrese Maxey is this year. And I mean that as far as like, I think everybody's on the same page now, as he is a key, crucial part of the foundation of this franchise moving forward. But I still haven't exactly landed in my brain what I see him ultimately becoming as an NBA player. Is he always going to be a score-first guy who's kind of just lighting up the score sheet, a spark, doing all those things, being the elite shooter that he's turned himself into? Is he a guy that can grow into a guy capable of running an offense, being a point guard? What is the best pairing with Tyrese Maxey? I do buy into that as kind of one of the biggest questions heading in the season that they're seeking to find out. But the parts that I keep circling back to as far as this actually working, there's two things. Number one, I have like an issue with just the logic of punting a year of Joel Embiid's prime. That this guy is that special of a talent, and we have no clue how many more seasons that we're going to get of him playing at this type of level. I don't expect him to be leading the league in scoring for the third consecutive year, but he's still going to be a guy among the top 5 talents in the NBA. There's no doubt about it. So when you have a talent that special, I feel you kind of owe it to him and to the entire franchise to find a way to go for it every season. And I just kind of feel like that on a logistics standpoint. And the other part of it is we really just don't see stars leaving free agency anymore. It just doesn't happen. There's honestly an argument to be made that it's more valuable to have these inflated contracts like James Harden and like Tobias Harris, because at least then you can flip them when the Dame Lillard or whatever the next unhappy star situation comes about. Like, we just really haven't seen stars leaving free agency. And I understand it works for both sides because teams want to get something back for that player as well, which is why we're kind of at this stalemate in the state of the NBA. And on the other side of things, when it comes to players having to that free agency right, that means they have to want to come to Philadelphia. And if we're really being honest with ourselves, why would Kawhi Leonard look at the state of the Sixers over the past couple of years and say, you know what, that's where I want to play next? When you think about all the turnover, both with roster, in the front office, we haven't had a normal offseason throughout since the process happened. That it's been one thing after another. And that's just not the best sales pitch to these free agents going anywhere. So I do get the logic of it. I understand it might be the best long-term situation, but to me, it just feels like something has to click in a way that I'm not confident of it happening. And unfortunately for Joel, like for some reason, he doesn't attract stars in the same way that I feel an MVP should or a lot of guys. And that's been something I've struggled with. I don't really think it's the play style, which I've seen thrown at him a ton, but I just kind of circle back to that I don't know if I realistically seeing an NBA level superstar saying Philadelphia is my next destination. Either you guys have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I completely agree. And the hard part too, it's like, if that is the plan, which I don't think it is, but for those people thinking that is, what if that doesn't work? What if, to your point, the plan leads to the offseason, but he comes, then it's like, what do we do now? And you're exactly right. A guy, a robot like Kawhi Leonard, why on earth would he want to come to Philly? It doesn't make sense. In my head, I'd be like, that's amazing. What a pairing of those two with Maxey. That's unbelievable. You're exactly right. And I really like the point that you brought up of you really can make an argument of those inflated contracts actually being more valuable, because you're right. It holds way more weight. So I completely agree. I agree. That's all I can say. Everything you just ran down, you nailed.
James, any last thoughts on the cap space?
Yeah, I think maybe it's less about attracting stars and more about like building out a roster of guys that they believe fits alongside this crew. Because I feel like the big thing that the Sixers are, we've always talked about is like they've got guys, they just don't fit. And, this guy, X, Y, and Z, Tobias Harris hasn't been used right, or God forbid it be Al Horford, or, these guys that have come in. It's like there's talent there. I don't know why it's not working. And it ends up just being whether it was coaching or, fit system. You can go down the list there, but maybe it's more about the opportunity to put certain guys around other guys and make it fit. Nick Nurse has relationships with players. And I almost said like, oh, that's why Kawhi would come play here. But then I remembered he left after one season there, the second he had the chance.
Right after winning a championship.
After winning a championship. So like, maybe not. Maybe I was completely wrong. My first thought was like, yeah, Kawhi and Nick Nurse, they won a championship together. And then I was like, he left the second he had a chance. He was out of there. He's also at, like, him and Paul George are they're also at home, right? Like they both are from LA. So like hard to imagine that they'd come back East Coast after being away from home for so long. So I don't know. OG Anunoby, like I don't know. You could throw all these names. I think it's more about just like the flexibility and the freedom and not being like, oh, I'd love to have this guy, but we have Tobias Harris instead, or we have all this money tied up in this guy. So maybe it's just more about having that liberty to do it.
For sure. And just to put a bow on it, for the record, the biggest free agent these Sixers have brought in this era has been Al Horford, has been the successful recruiting methods there, who hated it here for every second that he was here after being overpaid.
I hated him here. Let the record show.
Yeah.
I hate him.
And his sister. And his sister. But anyway, one more guy that I do want to touch on, and we kind of brushed over it, is Buddy Hield. That there are rumors that the contract extensions with the Pacers have broken down. Buddy very clearly wants to get paid. This is something that would throw off that cap space plan, but he is an all-time theoretical Sixer, a guy that has been in the rumors for years. So I'll throw it to you first, Josh. Do you think there's any chance that a Buddy Hield deal gets done? Because even if they want to keep this cap space plan alive, you could theoretically find a trade, whether it be a Tobias Harris deal or something like that, where you could at least allow him to play out this season and go from there. Do you think Buddy's the type of guy that they would take that risk for, or do you think this is all not worth talking about?
My personal opinion, I think if we find a way to make it work, I think we should get him. Truly.
Yeah.
Buddy has become, to me, criminally underrated. I don't know why. I mean, who knows behind closed doors why the contract extension and talks didn't work out. But I love Buddy Hield's game. And I think putting him next to a Joel Embiid, next to a Tyrese Maxey, would be a perfect fit. I love how he plays. I love how he shoots. Obviously, he's just gotten better and better and more efficient. Like, I really like Buddy Hield. Now, do I think that we'll actually make a play at him? Probably not. I would be shocked if we did. However, I would love it. And truly, I've been on the record. I've said that for a couple seasons because, again, he's been linked to us for forever.
Yeah.
But I love him. I am a big fan of his game. And even going back to, remember with the Ben Simmons and Halliburton thing when Buddy was still in Sacramento, and they were, I mean, take this for what it's worth, but there were like certain tweets that they had liked about them possibly coming to Philly. Buddy Hield has liked like every one of those. So I don't know. Is he a guy? Of course, he's a guy who A, he wants to get paid. That's why they're looking for a trade. But B, he wants to play competitive ball, man. That dude is just kind of rotted away in Sacramento and now in Indy. Like my absolute nightmare is a team like the Bucks get aggressive and throw together something like Bobby Portis, Grayson Allen, whoever it takes, and they go get Buddy Hield. Like that's my nightmare. I don't want to happen. Or the Celtics end up working something out with I don't want that. So I would hope the Sixers would do it. I'm not holding my breath, but would welcome him with open arms. I would be the guy with the sign. It's sitting at the airport welcoming him when he shows up. I would love Buddy Hield in Philly.
I love it and totally agree. James, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we've been on record as well. We've been buddy guys for a while. And I think that there's 3 factors of like why, against the movement to get Buddy Hield and to give up assets to get him, to have to extend him after that, considering the reason he's looking to get out is to extend him. And the fact that like he's sneakily 30 years old already. He was an old college player, played all 4 years, came out a little bit older. So it seems like he still like would be on that younger track. He is on the north side of 30, once this season ends. So that's something you have to consider as well when you're thinking about timelines and windows and things of that nature. But on the opposite side, Sean and I were kind of gushing over his stats, looking over them before we got on the pod. And it's like, dude, he's taking 10 threes a game, shooting over 40%. It's off the catch, it's off the dribble, it's off the screens, it's off everything. Like he is as lethal and dangerous of a shooter as you can add. And you think about back to times when Joel Embiid did play alongside great shooters and even guys like Seth Curry, JJ Redick, and how the offense really was catered around that and how much he benefited from that. Buddy is that type of shooter, if not like volume wise, better, definitely than Seth. JJ Redick was a different story because he's just has the reputation and everything, but Buddy as well. But like volume, efficiency, where he's getting to the, to those touches and those shots. On top of that, he's 6'4", 6'5", 7-foot wingspan, like the whole thing. He's, a legit wing in the league. So the positives really might outweigh the negatives there. I wonder what the contract looks like that he's looking for. And depending on that, I think I would be willing to do what you got to do to get him. But, there are significant reasons why I could see that they won't, and I won't be surprised if they won't. But like you said, Josh, I would be rooting for it if it happens.
Yeah, and there's kind of 2 different trade outlooks for this. Number 1 would pretty much be a straight up Tobias Harris swap. There's been interest from the Pacers in Tobias. There's been a couple rumors there. So that's something that would not surprise me. And both those guys are on the last year of their contract. You also could muster up some sort of potential like PJ Tucker, Furkan, and a pick kind of deal or some sort of package like that could potentially interest Indiana, depending on how bad that they want to get him out of there. For me, I feel like either way, even if this is you trade from he plays out this season and he potentially walks, for me, that's still worth it. Like if you have a chance to get Buddy Hield and at least see what he does this season, I'm still cool with that. Because Josh, I agree with you that I think he's become underrated. I don't think people understand just how truly elite of a shooter that he is. And to rattle off like a couple stats, for his career, he's a 40.2% three-point shooter while attempting 7.7 three-pointers a game. And just last season, he shot 42.5% from 3 while attempting 8.5 three-pointers per game. Like that's a ridiculous combination of volume and efficiency. And by the way, he's been a 20-point per game scorer, 19, 16.6, 15.6, 16.8 last year, 18.2 the year before. Like he puts up real deal numbers. And by the way, he's super, super durable. That yes, he's 30, but he's played 80 or more games in 5 of the 7 years of his career. That just does not happen in the NBA. Like we never see that anymore. And just think about, like, to your point about JJ Redick and Seth Curry, for starters, those were 2 of the best partners with Embiid ever. And I think Buddy's just a straight up better basketball player than both of them, that he can do more. And I think he's just as effective as a shooter because he's turned himself into a complete basketball player. He can dribble a little bit. He can pass a little bit. I've been very impressed with kind of the the track that Buddy Hield has gone on as far as development. And I would love to get my hands on him as a Sixers fan. I would love to see what he looks like in there.
1000%. And one other thing too, I'm glad that you brought up Seth and JJ, because I loved both of those time in Philly. Loved them. However, it got to a point where it's like, okay, teams started a game plan for it. You can look back to that Toronto series. They attacked JJ every single possession. You look back to other series against
Atlanta.
Seth, and it was the exact same thing, right?
Yeah.
Buddy, to your point, James, he's a bigger dude. Like, I'm not saying he's elite defensively by any means, but he is not this dude who's going to get picked on every single time down the floor. Like, that alone, to your point, like Sean, you nailed it. He's a basketball player all the way around. He's incredibly efficient shooter. And like you guys nailed it. He can shoot it from everywhere. Like, he's not a catch and shoot guy. Like, he literally everything. So again, I should be wearing a Buddy Hield jersey for hell's sake. Big fan, big fan.
Throw the old Oklahoma 24 on. I would love it. Yeah.
Also, his voice. I just have to say this. Every time I hear a clip of him speak, I can't help but smile because it's like the most assumed voice. It doesn't match him at all, which I love.
Yeah, I mean, it can't be worse. The Evan Turner voice still like keeps me up at night when I see what comes out of him. So yeah, it can't be worse than that. But we'll wrap things up here. Just last thing, I kind of want to swing back on more the team as a whole in a positive direction. So we kind of touched on Nick Nurse. Josh, I'm going to throw this to you. What do you think is the number one thing you're looking forward to with Nick Nurse this year? Because like you, I'm very excited about him as the new head coach as well.
I love that we have the guy who made Joel Embiid's life hell for so long. Every time we played Toronto, you knew like, oh boy, this is gonna just, even if our team was significantly more talented, it was just going to be a grinded out matchup because Nick Nurse was game planning perfect for him. I love that he is on our side. I cannot wait to see the creativity and the stuff that he puts together for Joel and the guys around him. He's already come out and said, hey, Paul Reed should play and should have played up to this point with Embiid more. I can't wait to see what that looks like and how he uses him. I am very, very much on the Nick Nurse train. I can't wait to see what he does. And again, the roster is so unique and different, like we've talked about. How is he? Like, he has so many different levers that he can pull. And if there is one coach who we've had in the last 2 decades who has a roster like this, who can get creative, it's probably Nick Nurse to come up with something good with this. So I don't know, man. I am glad he is the one kind of heading the ship. And also, I just have to say, I am so happy. I am a big Drew Hanlon guy. I don't know how you guys feel. I like Drew Hanlon a lot.
I do as well.
Obviously, the trainer, big fan. What he's done for Joel, I think, is very significant. It gets overlooked. The fact that Tyrese has been working out with him this offseason, I think, is huge. Drew Hanlon came out. He's like, look, I fully expect him. If he doesn't average 25 a game, it's a total letdown, total disappointment. Like, that's what I like to hear. That is what we need to hear. And Tyrese, which we talked about this last time I was on, Sean, how he somehow has like continued to take a step when you think like, wow, he's moving really fast. How has he continued to take a step in his career? If he can do that again and get to that point where Joel doesn't have to lead the team in scoring, he doesn't have to, well, he probably will, but he doesn't have to lead the league in scoring, right? He can focus more on the defensive end, like, and Tyrese can step that up. Awesome. So again, with Nick Nurse leading everything, I just had to shout out my guy, Drew, but I am so happy that Tyrese is working with him this offseason.
Yeah, I'm also a Drew Hanlon guy. I understand the critiques of him, specifically like playing more individualized style and not as much within the team contract. I get it, but I'm a Drew Hanlon guy as well. I think Joel has improved so much under him, very specifically because of him as well. And I also, to your point on this, I think it's very cool how there had to be some sort of either introduction or transition of setting Tyrese up with Drew, or at least some connection made by Joel. I just think that whole aspect of things is very cool, of Embiid kind of bringing Tyrese like into the nest a little bit there. I think is awesome as well. James, I'll throw it to you. What are you most excited for Nick Nurse this season?
Yeah, I was going to say, first of all, I can't deny results with Hanlon. Like, the proof is in the pudding with them. But with Nick Nurse, dude, I've listened to he's been on 2 interviews. He's so passionate about the game of basketball. He's so like well-versed, and hearing his path of how he's gotten to where he is, like, the dude just eats, sleeps, and breathes basketball. Like, it's a complete 180 from the guy who was coaching here last year, where it's just like, it's going to be like, I think the biggest thing is offensive creativity and just like defensive intensity. There's going to be no plays off defensively. He talked about how he's going to get Joel the ball, and he said every single possible way you could imagine. It's not just going to be mid post post ups. It's not going to be elbow jumpers. Of course, he'll mix that in because that's what he's unbelievably good at. But there's going to be back screens and down screens, and he's going to be handling the ball. There's going to be dribble handoffs. There's going to be him running the pick and roll. It's going to be a plethora of different things. You're going to have to guard everything in the entire book. And like I said with him as well, I think there's going to be a system in which Joel thrives, but I don't think Joel will come before the system. And that's not a bad thing. I think it'll actually prop Joel up and make his life a lot easier. Whereas we saw last year and, in the years past, obviously it worked for him, put up career numbers. But, running one guy off a screen and then dumping it down to Joel at the elbow and everyone standing still and making him work the entire thing, like that just isn't efficient. It's not the way that, it's going to work. And you saw down the stretch of playoff games, like it's tough. It's hard to make tough shots all the time. So I think the life is just going to be a lot different under Nick Nurse. So offensive creativity and defensive intensity are going to be the bread and butter. And I think it's the one thing that's really been driving my energy and like excitement for the year is the fact that Nick Nurse is going to be taking over.
Yeah, 100%. And if I had to ask you guys real quick, how much older do you think Doc Rivers is than Nick Nurse?
Oh, God.
Okay, this is cheating because maybe it was you who tweeted it today. So it blew. I'm not going to say it, but it blew my mind.
All right, James, let's get your answer.
So now I know that it's different than what I think. In my mind, I want to say like 20 years, but I can only imagine it's like less than 5.
It is 5 years on the dot. And shout out running back Philly, who tweeted that. But yeah, I was pretty blown
that's
away.
who it was. Crazy.
I feel the same way though, James. I would have guessed like 15 years at least because there just feels like there's so much more youth to Nick Nurse. So I was pretty blown away to see that. But
he could have been Doc's kid. That in my mind, I'm like, he was. It's crazy, man.
Definitely. But Josh, I appreciate you joining us coming on today. Tell us what you got going on at the That's Ball Folks podcast.
Bingo. Nailed it. Check me out, man. Once a week, episodes rolling out. Some exciting stuff. I do giveaways all the time, which is fun. So got those rolling out weekly leading up to the season, which I'm pumped about. Man, again, it's so nice to feel a little life and positivity surrounding this team. James, I need to be more like you, brother, where you just have been positive and pumped all off season. I need to bottle that up. You should sell it. You make it going.
Yeah. I'll try.
But yeah, man, I love it, dude. Thank you guys for having me on here. I've loved chatting with you guys, and any day you get to talk Sixers basketball with good people like guys is a good day.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, appreciate you for coming on once again. Thank you to all you guys for tuning in. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, drop that like button, leave me a comment, let me know your thoughts, and we will talk with you next time here on Pick Swap Media.